So today I'm very excited to talk with a veteran who's had a huge impact on my life without even knowing it. When I was a college student at the University of Kentucky, I saw one of her campaign signs, and that kicked off a strong change in my worldview. So I am very happy to welcome Amy McGrath today. And if I could just kick it off, have you tell me a little bit about yourself and what brought you here?
Sure. Well, never thought I would be in politics most of my life. All I ever wanted to do was fly fighter jets since I was about 12 years old and serve the country. Grew up in Kentucky. My dad was a teacher, my mom's a doctor, and just sort of fell in love with serving, with being in the military. This is something that was just deep, very patriotic, and I had to work for that. I had the doors were closed to me as a young girl, and I had to learn about government because I had to advocate for federal policy and federal law changes at that young age in order for me to follow my dreams. And I got lucky because at the age of 18, we did make a change in our country. And that was the time that I left Kentucky and went right into the military and raised my right hand and swore to defend the Constitution of the United States. And 24 years in the United States Marine Corps, flying F-18s and doing lots of other things. So that has been my life. And then after that, I moved back to Kentucky to be with family and also to jump into politics because I think and still feel we need better leaders in this country, and we need them now.
And I feel like when we talk about the leaders we need in this country, so much of serving in the military is being a leader. Whether you're in uniform, out of uniform, it's every aspect of your life. And no one joins to get rich. No one joins because they just want to be in charge of everything. If that's your goal, there's way better ways to do that. Besides putting your life on the line, but also your physical, your mental health, your family's life, everything like that. I want to jump a little bit back into your military career before we talk about the politics side of it. You said you had to advocate for a law change. Now, for me to do what I did in the military, that was something that also happened. You can see my guidance behind me. I served in combat arms the year it opened. When I joined ROTC, women were not allowed to serve in armor infantry units. And then I was able to serve as an armor officer in an infantry unit. It's pretty paramount to my life. So I want to talk about a little bit how
And pretty incredible, I might add, for those people
it
listening.
was fun.
The
It was
ground
fun.
combat arms are no joke. And for you to have done that and you just sort of say, "Oh, I served in the armor," that's a big deal.
I appreciate it.
And I think that, you need to people need to understand that. It's a very hard jobs and important jobs.
Well, it was only possible because of the service that you did. And I will never mistake for a second that the possibilities and what was open to me in the career I had is only possible because of all the women who came before me who made it possible. So thank you.
And I feel
Um,
the same way. There were lots of women before me that did not have the opportunities I had, but that did so well in the opportunities they were given, that helped move the needle.
and all the women who were never recognized for their service, who,
100%.
whether they had to do it disguised or they had to, wear a different title than what they actually did. Um, I think we all have a lot of gratitude. And as a mother of daughters, women who make it possible for them and continue to fight for them to have the same opportunities that I had and hopefully even more. They deserve the same as their dad did. They deserve the same as their brothers have. Um, but with that, I know firsthand how difficult it can be to be one of the first women in a role, the pressure that's on you. All eyes are on you. When you make a mistake, it's not you making a mistake. It's this is why women shouldn't be here, any of this. What inspired you? Did your mother have an influence on you being willing to shatter this glass ceiling, or
You know,
what gave you the
my
confidence, and how do you carry that on?
Yes. So my mother did influence me. She was not somebody who said you should be a fighter pilot or you should go in the military. No,
I
no,
don't
no,
think
no.
most
That was
parents say
not
that,
that was
yeah.
not my mom. But she definitely influenced me because she was one of the first women graduates from the University of Kentucky Medical School back in the 1960s. So she was a trailblazer of her own in the medical field. And I knew that growing up, at a young age, I knew my mom was a little bit different than all the other moms. And I was really proud of that. I think when I wanted to go into the military and had this sort of dream, initially my parents were sort of like, maybe she'll grow out of this. But they also were always positive about it. And I remember bringing home a brochure from about the Naval Academy. And on the back of the brochure, Elizabeth, it had the percentage of people who apply, who actually get in. And it was very small. And it was pretty daunting, and then it had the scores of SATs and ACTs and all that. And that looked pretty high from my perspective. And I remember being like a freshman in high school and handing that brochure to my mother in our family room and saying, "Mom, this is where I want to go. This looks really hard." And my mom taking the brochure and looking at the front and then turning it over and looking at all the stats on the back and just, taking it all in and then handing it back to me and saying, very matter of fact, "You can do this. You work hard, you can do it." And that was the confidence, you know? She just looked me in the eye and said, "You can do this." And it wasn't she wouldn't lie to me, because there are things that you can't do in life. And now my mother has a unique story of her own because she is a polio survivor who her leg was paralyzed since she was 10 years old. So she's not somebody that goes around saying she's going to run marathons. She couldn't walk. There was this honesty there and this matter of factness that really got to me when she said, "You can do this. You just got to work your butt off."
That's incredible. I wanna go back to, when you brought the brochure home, you didn't say, "This looks cool. This is awesome." You said, "This looks hard." Um, Running a campaign is hard. Holding public office is hard. So it seems to me you're not one who ever takes the easy path. Because I feel like we've talked about a lot of pivots in your life where you could have taken a much easier route, and it speaks to the resiliency. Um, so I'd like to ask you about resiliency and how, especially in your political career, obviously you've had it in your military career, but in your political career, how that's carried through.
It has. I think being a fighter pilot, being a Marine, you have to have thick skin. And the Marine Corps taught me a lot about having people look you in the eye and telling you the good and the bad and wanting you to improve, but not sugarcoating it. And that there's a lot of that in politics. It is hard. And, one of my favorite quotes is from Eleanor Roosevelt, who basically said, "You have to do hard things. You have to do the things you think you cannot do." That's the kind of leader, in my belief, our country really needs. A lot of people don't want to go into politics because it is hard and you're gonna get criticized and that there's a lot of downsides to it. But if we don't have good people step up, then where are we at? Then we just have a bunch of corrupt individuals leading our country. And I first looked at this in 2016, in the election of 2016, where I looked and I said, the person that rose to the top was not a person of character and integrity. And what does that mean for our country? And in one small way, I thought, I can do this. This is hard. This is needed. Let's do it.
Absolutely. I admire you for that. And that's around the time where I saw that happening when I was working for the Republican Party of Kentucky, saw that rise to power. And then I saw your sign, and my whole worldview had to change. Recognizing, when I was in college, I interned for the Republican Party of Kentucky. And then I had this idea in my head, having grown up in a very small, rural, red areas. My father's a Marine veteran. Both my parents were always Republican. I say were. Um, and in general, fairly conservative. So this idea that the Republican Party was patriotism, that any veteran obviously would be a Republican because they support the military, these things that are important. And when I saw a campaign sign, I'm like, wow, this is awesome. Like a female veteran running for office in the state that I love and I call home. So I went back to my dorm room and I Googled you and I was kind of like, wait, but how do you run as a Democrat? Like I'd always heard just these horrible things about Democrats, right? Just these ideas. Um, so how do you respond? Because it's something we hear a lot in the media still. I'm sure there's a lot of adults who still have the mindset I had at that age where you're getting fed different information. You are told that Democrats are not patriotic, that they don't serve, that they hate America. How do you respond as a veteran who clearly loves your country?
Yeah, well, first of all, no political party has the lock on patriotism. And all of us come from one of the things I learned in the military was that this nation is built and has so many patriots of different ethnicities, different religions, different backgrounds, come from different regions. And what unites Americans is, and it goes all the way back to the revolution, right? We are not a country of one culture. We're not a country of one religion or one ethnicity. We are a country of many different peoples that are united by ideals. And, when you swear an oath in the military, you don't swear it to one person or to a political party. You swear it to the Constitution, which is the framework of those ideals. And I feel like, when people say, "Oh, Democrats aren't patriotic," I mean, really? Come on, it's it's uh, it's sort of ridiculous in my mind when I think about the fact that we always want our country to be better. And just, criticizing your country, criticizing the policies is not unpatriotic. Working for change is not unpatriotic. You know, the people 100 years ago who worked uh, to stop child labor in our country, they were not unpatriotic. The women who worked for suffrage, for women's right to vote, they are not unpatriotic. You look at all the movements for change to try to make our country better. Just by pointing out the problems that we have in our country, that doesn't make you unpatriotic. I think it makes you uh, more patriotic because you're willing to look at it and say, look, there are things that we need to improve on. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union. All right. We're not done. We have a lot of work to do. And I think that's what Democrats in general are clear eyed about. And my belief is that we need people that have sort of common sense attitudes and to be able to look at issues and try to fix them and not just, say, oh, no change. We're good. And that's the way I sometimes feel about the other side.
Yeah, I agree. I always say, when I served in the military as a platoon leader, company commander, all that, you have to hold people accountable and make change because you love the organization. I loved my unit. I love my soldiers. And if someone's coming in and disrupting that and isn't holding our values, isn't that, of course, we're going to hold people accountable to that. We're going to criticize the system. We're going to fight to make improvements. And I really admire that you're not just criticizing, but fighting to make those improvements and clearly have been for a while.
Yeah, and then you can get into some of the policy stuff. Look, the Republicans now, I don't know how partisan you want this to be, but these guys, they put somebody who is clearly unqualified in charge of our entire Department of Defense right
Yes.
now. That Democrats didn't do that. Democrats didn't put a weekend talk show host who couldn't make it, in the military as in charge of the military. Democrats didn't, call veterans suckers and losers. Democrats didn't cut 64,000 and want to cut 80,000 jobs from the VA. You know, those are Republicans doing that kind of
Absolutely.
stuff.
Yeah,
Cutting things like GI benefits. Because when you cut the department that helps veterans get the GI benefits, you're hurting veterans. When you
absolutely.
cut jobs from the VA, you're hurting veterans healthcare. It's to me, there there's
Mind-boggling
there's
how to
so
think
much of a difference right now.
absolutely. Yeah. So I did wanna talk about how you got into politics, right? And fighting for this change. How did it feel writing Senator McConnell as a child for change, not getting response? Now, on a personal note, I also wrote Senator McConnell as a constituent, asking for change, no response, and for a few other things. But writing him as a child, doing a whole military career, and then running against the same person.
Well, I wrote every member of the House and Senate Armed Services Committees, and I wrote not just Senator McConnell, but both my senators and my representative. I did not get a response from Senator McConnell. I did get a response from Jim Bunning, who ended up becoming a senator, and he was my representative at the time. And I still have that letter today, and it basically says, "You're a girl, go do something else." If you read between the lines, right? It's very formal. It's one page, and it's you can go be a Navy nurse, but we're not going to work for change because we don't need change.
The system we're trying to
And I
change
mean
is our
that's
relationship.
that's basically what they said, and I got several letters back on the other side that said our military exists to fight and win the nation's wars, and we should have the best people in those positions. And if
I
you're
agree.
good enough, you ought to be able to compete. It never said, well, we should lower the standards. Never.
No one's ever argued
No
for that.
one's ever said
No
that.
one has
Right.
ever,
It
ever
just
argued.
it just simply said if you meet the standard, you should be able to get in that tank or
Yep.
in that submarine or in
That's all
that
we asked
cockpit.
for.
And
Yeah.
that's all I ever wanted. So I didn't think too much of it at the time because there were a lot of members of Congress that didn't write me back.
Mhm.
You know, I'm not, as a young 12, 13-year-old girl, I wasn't even a voter. I was probably in his mind, I was a nobody. But to come back later and run against him, it wasn't so much a personal thing on that note. It was more of a, this guy's been in office a really long time, and he's done a lot of things in my belief that really hurt our country and hurt the United States Senate. I felt like it was time for change, and I still feel that way.
Absolutely. And that's the point I really wanted to call out. It's you wrote a senator as a child, did a 30-year career in the military, an incredible career, retired out, and then ran against the same person. I think that speaks to a lot of the problems that we have and how when we talk about change, how we get there. Why would we change? It's not
100%. Because
and
you know this, Elizabeth. In the military, a 4-star, they're not in their position for 30 years.
no, no,
Even the military knows you don't do that.
no. I mean, and the toll that it takes too when you're in a leadership role on somebody, we need our senators, our representatives, our leadership to be able to give 100%. And anyone who's served in an incredibly demanding role where you are on 24/7, you really don't get breaks, knows you can't do that for 30 years and give 100%. There's a reason why the military doesn't let you stay in command 4 years, why we have cycles. So when we look at our leadership who's doing it, we do have to question, like, how nobody can do that. No one's superhuman.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's why I'm for across the board term limits. And I know that there's an argument of, oh, we need to keep the staffers because they know how things run, and these folks in office get all this experience. Okay, great. That's fine. It doesn't outweigh the corruption that happens. So I guess I would say this: does anyone think things are going well? Let's try this. Let's try term limits for 20 years, and see if we can do this, better.
Something else to talk about in the military, you were exposed, you learned people come from all different backgrounds, diversities. So much of what makes America incredible is how diverse we are. When you're in the military, can you hire everyone who you lead? Do you pick them by hand?
No.
No.
Mm-mm.
You
You get
so
assigned.
for anyone listening who's not familiar with the military, you are assigned your unit. You very rarely, if you're in a high leadership position, you might pick your aide de camp or these things. But the whole units you're leading are going to be incredibly diverse. How do you take that type of leadership and translate that into being in public office?
Well, I think for me, it comes back to what I learned in the military about servant leadership. And I think right now we're seeing more and more, particularly at the very top, the opposite of
Mhm.
that. You know, we have a president right now who's all me, me, me. It's all about him. Everything he does is about him. And it's just so the opposite of what I learned in the United States Marine Corps. In the United States Marine Corps, the leader eats last. The leader is the one, everybody else gets their supplies first. The leader gets what's left over. The leader is the one that does whatever that hard thing, they do that first. Um, and and they're also that they also take care of everyone else before themselves. And I think that's what servant leadership is, and we have lost that in the political realm right now. So that's the biggest thing I learned. I think we have to get back to that. I think that's what leadership really is.
So, as a representative from the state of Kentucky holding public office, are you there to just represent Democrats, everyone who voted for you, or how do you ensure that you're there to represent all of your constituents regardless of their party affiliation?
Well, I think that's really important. That's why my slogan is country over party.
Absolutely.
And I'm running for U.S. Senate, which is the same thing. We go to the U.S. Senate. You would be the representative for
Yeah,
the
when I
whole
say representative,
state.
I don't mean
Yeah,
House representative.
100%.
Yeah,
So you'd be the
represent.
representative for the whole state.
Mhm.
And I think, I may be a Democrat, but I'm an American first, and I'm a Kentuckian first. And I think you have to constantly, and this is part of good leadership. You have to constantly be talking to as many people as possible, not just people who agree with you, not just people who are going to be on your in your political party or on your side. You have to talk. You have to go everywhere. You have to talk to as many people as you possibly can, and that you can get the sort of views of everybody to try to make solid decisions on how you represent people, and that's what I want to do. For me, and this is the last thing I'll say on this, um, because I think it's uh, it's such a contrast with the gentlemen who are running on the other side. Because right now, all three of those guys are basically running to please one man. They're running to kiss up as much as they can to Mar-a-Lago. Kentucky is secondary to them. And why do I say that? Tariffs. They know tariffs hurt Kentucky. They know it hurts our bourbon industry. They know it hurts our manufacturing, our farmers. They know it hurts people at the checkout line in Kroger, but they are unwilling to say so. They shift around in their seats and oh, I believe in President Trump, blah, blah, blah. They know this hurts their constituents. They're not willing to step up and be a voice for their constituents because they're so beholden to their party and to this one man. And I think we're done with that.
Yeah, I think that's a big sentiment across the country we're seeing right now is when someone votes for a person at the booth, they wanna know that they're there to represent them, not not be there to please other people, that they are there and they are willing to take flack for representing
Yep.
them. You're not gonna
Yeah.
please everybody, and you shouldn't be able to please everybody if you hold office. You should be
I
there to
mean,
represent.
ultimately, they work for Donald Trump. They work for the people of Kentucky. And that's, and that would be true whether the roles were reversed, whether it was President Biden in there. You work for the people of Kentucky.
Absolutely. I wanna shift a little bit, um, more so just wanting to give you some time to open up to have people get to know you. Aside from your campaign, aside from policies, anyone who wants to read your policies are gonna read them, and I know you have a lot of information on that, so I want people to be able to get to know you, who you're representing. So what is the number one thing you would want voters to know about you?
Well, I think what I just said, which is country over party. My whole life, I didn't grow up as a Republican or a Democrat. I just wanted to serve the country. Like so many people, we are not super partisan. I married a Republican. My entire time in the military was as an independent. And I think the one thing I want people to take away is I'm gonna go and I'm gonna represent to the best I can Kentucky and Kentuckians' interests, and not a party or not a person, but Kentuckians, their interests.
So speaking about Kentucky, what do you love most about Kentucky? A state
The
that's
people,
very dear to my heart.
the people. I think it's I even when I was in the military and I lived in Texas and California and Virginia, Maryland, and all around the world, from Japan to all the stands. I've been to all the stands, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, all the stands. Um, I always come home to Kentucky. And it's because of family, but it's also because of just the people. Every chance I got, I would come home. And I feel that way today, and it's why I wanted to bring my family, back to Kentucky after I retired.
So if someone's never been to Kentucky before, they fly in to see you, where's the first place you're taking them?
Well, that's a good question. Probably hiking, because I love hiking, and that's something that,
I
I
was
just
surprised. I moved to Kentucky from Southern Utah, so Zion National Park was my backyard. And people are like, "Oh, let's go for a hike." I'm like, "You mean like a trail walk? Like, what are we talking about?" And no, like, there's beautiful, incredible hikes. I was probably a little ignorant too, but I was really surprised. I love that answer.
well, it's way different than Utah. It's a different
Yes,
type
very
of
different
hiking,
hiking, but it's yes,
but I love that, and then, probably a distillery tour. We have a lot of bourbon, as you know, and that's kinda fun, and I think it's really fun for people to sit down and kind of taste the different types and stuff like that, so that would be fun.
they're fun. They're kinda nerdy to go on in a good way. Like, I'm kind of the person, my family goes to a museum, they're, like, looking at things and running the next exhibit. I'm like, "I'm still reading the plaque, guys, hold on." But I like them for that, and I don't drink, but I do really enjoy the distillery tours and taking people there. Um, so running a campaign, running for office, incredibly stressful. Like we talked about, you've never chosen the easy path in life. I'm sure you've learned how to deal with stress pretty well between the Naval Academy, a long naval career, running for office, all the moves, all the people who rely on you. It's something you're used to. How do you relieve that stress? So you ensure that you can still show up 100% for the people who need you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do think you have to kinda take care of yourself, because if you burn out, it's just it's not good.
No.
And I've been fortunate throughout my time, not only on the campaign trail, but also in the military to, um, to know that, and I've also had my mom sort of in the back of my mind always saying, "Hey, what are you doing for yourself?" You know? And that's always helped. For me, I do like hiking. I think that's really important just to take a step back and go away for a while. I spend a lot of time with my family, because I have kids, 13, 11, and 9. So, enjoying their soccer games and, football games and that sort of thing. That's kinda what I do, I guess, for myself these days.
And then what, just some kind of quick rapid fire, fun, get to know you ones. What is your go to comfort show?
Many I will admit I'm kind of a nerd. So I don't think comfort shows, you probably can't put documentaries in that category, but I do like documentaries.
I
I
love,
love, like, Ken Burns just came out with this new one on the American Revolution, so I'm starting that. But in terms of, like, if you're on an airplane, right, and you're just like, "Hey, I've got 30 minutes left on this flight. What can I cycle through to pull," you're gonna go to The Office because that's just classic. I like Abbott Elementary. I love Barbara. She's my favorite character in Abbott Elementary. She just reminds me of so many people I've met along the way. And, so those 2 I'm gonna kinda watch if I have 30 minutes on the
so speaking of kind of nerdy, I'm also in that. If you were at a bar trivia, someone needed a team member, what is your category that you are absolutely 100% put me in, coach?
history,
Any specific?
American history.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. My brother, is a PhD American historian. So he, like, really loves it and did it and actually went to school, for a long period of time, and he teaches that now. But I love it. Why? Because it's just something I think I got that from my father. He was a big history buff, and, one of the things I love about Kentucky is when my mom was a doctor, my dad was a teacher growing up. So in the summertime, my father would take us as kids around Kentucky and we would do historical stuff. So we would go to, battlefields or something like that, and we would, study history. And that was kind of like what I got from him. And so now every book I read is, usually either historical fiction or history nonfiction.
I love historical fiction. It's my favorite genre. Especially, I think for a while I was in a realm where I was reading like back to back on accident, honestly, but historical fiction centered on female heroines. So like all the light
Yeah,
cannot see, like Nightingale, all those they're incredible to me.
and I think certain people just have a connection with history. It's like in their sort of character traits. When I go somewhere, I want to know the history of that place. That's important to me. I like my own ancestry. I've looked that up and studied that, and that's not true for everybody. Some people don't care about it, but for me, that connection to history is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same way. That's cool to hear. And then if you could hear one band or performer live, whether they're dead, alive, whatever, you could go to one concert, what would you pick?
Dead or alive? Wow, I don't know. I'd have to think about the dead one. I've always followed Alison Krauss, since I was probably in my 20s, and when I was in the military, I used to, take time off and try to get to her concerts wherever I could find one around the country. This was before I was married and had kids. But, I love listening to her, and, I have all of her albums.
It's awesome. And then I'll end it with, what any closing thoughts you have. But my last question would be, uh, as a mother, I know personally that drives a lot of what we do. I feel like a lot of you kind of changes when you become a mother. I felt that way. You always have this drive motivation, but then when there's children looking up to you, it's kind of, you can't fail them, right? You feel that way about a lot of kids too. So, what part does being a mother play in your career and your motivation to run for office?
Well, I think it's about what kind of world do we wanna leave our children. I think when you're a mom, you have this just deep vested interest in making sure that your kids, you not only want to set them up personally for success, but you also want them to inherit a country and a world that is a little bit better, certainly not worse than what you inherited. And I feel that a lot in our country right now with the what's happening to our democracy. I worry about that. And so a lot of what I do and the motivations I have is to make sure that when we, because you're younger than I, but when our generation sort of hands this off to the next generation, we hand something off that we can be proud of. I think the greatest generation did that for us. And I'm determined to make sure that we do that for them,
Absolutely. That's a
for
lot
our
of,
kids.
um, yeah. I mean, even doing these for me, something that I feel it's like I can't sit back and not do anything to make this place better for them. They deserve me showing up and fighting for their future. Um, so with that, I appreciate all the time we've taken. I know we're a little over the 30 minutes. Any closing thoughts, anything that you would like to add, get on the record, say, I would love to open the door for you to have that.
Well, I just, to your listeners, I would just say, please stay attuned to what's happening in our country and pay attention. You may not want to get into politics. Politics is just people. And we need good people to pay attention, to support campaigns. That's really important. Don't be cynical and say we can't do anything. We have to do. We have to step up and make a difference for our country right.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it.